My fingers tremble when I tap on the keys of my laptop because I have never been so scared in my life. The clock says 2 hours, 30 minutes. I have only half an hour to talk about what happened over the past week. Monday. I had a nightmare. On the eve of school, I went to bed early, but in the middle of the night I woke up with a strange feeling. I dreamed that I was underwater, and it was difficult for me to breathe because something was pressing on me. Gradually, I realized that I was waking up, but the feeling of heaviness did not go away. It felt like something was on my chest. I sat up abruptly in bed, and only then was able to breathe freely. When I lay down again, the feeling of heaviness did not return. Tuesday. In the evening I stayed at home alone and made notes in my diary, listening to my headphones as always. The volume was sufficient to drown out outside noises, but after about 2 minutes I realized that something was distracting me. Steps, light creaking boards. Taking out the headphones, I listened the last quiet creak in silence. I would have assumed that it was the sound from neighboring apartments, but I have long been well aware of the acoustics of the house. The noise from the neighbors reaches our apartment only when they speak in raised tones or throw frying pans, which is less common. So, I heard footsteps in the empty next room. Wednesday. Now I think that it was worthwhile to attach importance to this earlier. Having gone headlong into everyday worries, I did not notice something strange that was going on around me. And it was worth noting, even as it was worth. That night I had a nightmare again, this time with me in the title role. It was as if I had been cursed, and now I feel the burning fire everywhere, eventually burning in it. When I jumped up, I could not stop the trembling in my body for a long time. My parents had already left for work, so I gradually calmed down and headed to the bathroom. I got in the shower and turned on the cold water. In a second I would have been scalded if I hadn't jumped to the side. Puffs of steam poured from the cold faucet, and real boiling water flowed. I turned on the hot water faucet, same thing. Cold water didn't seem to exist at all. I remembered a dream, and my teeth, against my will, began to beat off a nervous tap dance. An hour later, both taps continued to beat with boiling water. When my mother came, I told her about the strange behavior of the water. Naturally, she decided to check, opened a cold tap, and cold water really flowed from the tap. Not just cold, icy. I myself once again closed and opened both taps. Everything returned to normal. Deciding that the change of pipes was to blame for everything, I again went to the shower. But as soon as I turned on the cold water again, boiling water came out of the tap again. Angry and frightened, I ran out of the bathroom to check the faucet in the kitchen. Cold. Icy. Mom looked at me strangely and asked if everything was all right. This incident completely blew me away. I waited for my parents to go to bed and locked myself in my room, putting on my headphones. Closer to 1 in the morning, the sound of footsteps came from the next room again. At first I thought that it was one of the parents who went to the bathroom, but the creaking became more and more pronounced closer to my room. As if someone was at the door. Nerves could not stand it. I quickly got up and opened the door. Nobody. The parents' bedroom was quiet, so they were both asleep. Closing myself again, I sat down at the computer and continued reading on my studies. However, a strange feeling of discomfort prevented me from concentrating on the lesson. I turned off the netbook, turned off the light and went to bed. The clock read 1 hour and 15 minutes. Around 3 a.m., I was woken up by my own screams. I had a dream, so terrible that I felt my way to the switch, and, only by turning on the light, was able to begin to think. Oddly enough, I could not remember the dream itself, but when I lay down again, I could not bring myself to turn off the lamp. For the first time in my entire life. Time 2 hours, 43 minutes. Just a little more time. I can already feel it coming. Thursday. I did not go to school, citing poor health. When my parents left for work, I went to the bathroom and got in the shower. Concerns about the behavior of the plumbing dissipated when warm jets ran in smooth streams over my skin. I stood for a minute or two, relaxing after a half-sleepless night. In the morning, everything that happened seemed like a bad dream. Suddenly, the bright light from the bulb began to blink imperceptibly at first, then fading more and more clearly. I felt a rush of chilling fear, and as soon as possible I got out of the shower, wrapping myself in a towel. At that moment, when I almost ran out of the bathroom, the light went out completely. The day passed in a blur. Even in the light of sunlight, I shuddered from any rustle and sound. And once she almost screamed in surprise when a truck started abruptly under the window. The sounds of music, which always calmed me, irritated me, food made me sick, and in general my state was close to hysterical. In the end, exhausted and nervous, I lay down on the sofa for a minute and immediately fell asleep. When I opened my eyes, the room was already dark. Almost unconsciously, I got up and walked over to the switch, and only when the yellow electric light filled the room was I able to breathe calmly. The time on the clock in the hall was 2 minutes past midnight. That night I sat down and tried to analyze everything that had happened during that time. Most of the strangeness that happened occurred between midnight and 3 in the morning, and closer to 3 whatever it was, became more active. 17 o'clock. I began to count the minutes, afraid of what I might hear or. No, it was scary to even think of this thought. My parents were sleeping in the next room, and I decided that tomorrow I would certainly tell what was happening to me. If earlier the prospect of being at the reception of a psychotherapist was frightening, then in the light of recent events, it seemed the only possible salvation. About 3:30, despite the loud music in the headphones, I began to fall asleep while sitting at the table. I put my head in my hands and closed my eyes, and I drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, the clock on the netbook monitor showed 2 hours, 58 minutes. And then the light bulb of the lamp standing on the table exploded with a loud crack. I screamed in fright and felt my heart beat fast. Almost on the verge of panic, I told myself only one thing. Pull yourself together. You are a rational person and you can handle your fear. I closed my eyes, clenched my fists and began to count out loud to 5 as slowly as possible. The panic gradually receded, but the feeling that I was not alone in the room only intensified. I covered my ears with my hands, afraid that I would go crazy if I heard any sound near me. So I sat for I don't know how long, pulling my knees up to my chest and quietly rocking back and forth in my chair. Friday. I woke up in my room on the floor. Apparently, at night I fell asleep in the same position as I was sitting, so I didn't notice how I slipped off the chair. The curtains in the room were drawn, so it seemed that it was still dark. Strangely, I did not want to see the sunlight at that moment. The feeling of fear passed. I sat down and, clasping my head in my hands, began to think what to do next. Firstly, I still could not tell my parents about what was happening. Even if I am considered crazy, sent to a psychotherapist, and there, in turn, left for treatment in a hospital, the situation will only worsen. Darkness will come anyway, only to meet it with your hands tied, and a feeling of complete helplessness is much more terrible. Secondly, I came up with the idea to look at similar cases on the internet. Whatever it was, it must have happened to others before. Perhaps someone knows how to deal with this. The search results scared me more than I could have imagined. In all the articles that described situations similar to mine, it was said that this phenomenon was called obsession, and that in the end it was impossible to fight it. There were also known cases when exorcists intervened in order to expel the devil from the body of the possessed, but in both cases the outcome was fatal. Although in my case there were many discrepancies with these descriptions, I did not feel someone's constant presence, except perhaps in the dark, did not lose my appetite, did not faint. It still made a depressing impression on me. In addition, from the very moment I woke up, I had a strange feeling that everything should end soon. This thought did not bring much peace, rather, reconciled with some kind of doom. Anyway, sooner or later, something has to happen, because no matter how much it goes on, I'm sure I could never get used to constant fear. The rest of the day was spent in some kind of gloomy thoughts. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that I was deliberately avoiding unlit corners in the apartment, and that someone is watching me from there. Even the return of my parents did not relieve me of this feeling. It was calmer in their presence, but I knew that as soon as I returned to my room and went to bed, it would start again. When the clock was 11 o'clock, 15 minutes in the evening, my parents wished me good night and went to their bedroom. I left the table lamp on in the hall and sat down on the sofa with a book. It was impossible to concentrate on reading, every nerve in the body was tense, and hearing, against the will, began to react sharply to every sound. In the end, I closed the book and went to my room. Turning out the light, I quickly crawled headlong under the covers and closed my eyes, hoping that I would be able to fall asleep before midnight. Maybe because I didn't really sleep for the last week, or maybe because before the dangerous time, as I began to call it to myself, I felt relatively safe, but only sleep did not take long. And suddenly, as if right above my head, there was a loud whistling whisper. Instantly waking up, I popped out from under the covers and looked around. That short sound gave me goosebumps, because no human throat could repeat it. I tried to pronounce it, but it didn't even sound like it, although it sounded clear in my memory. To say that what happened scared me is an understatement. It's one thing when you feel something nearby, it's another thing when it betrays its own presence. And it's really scary. I lay with my eyes open and stared up at the ceiling, counting the minutes. Since the curtains were not drawn for the night, the light of the moon fell through the windows of the room and created a bizarre play of shadows on the ceiling. I was afraid to move, afraid to even turn my head. The only thing I could do was repeat to myself the words of all my favorite songs. For some reason, this occupation always calmed me and returned the ability to think. So this time, I was almost able to convince myself that that whisper was only in my imagination, when suddenly the light of the moon was strangely refracted, and the distorted features of a creature appeared on the ceiling. I saw him so clearly that I screamed, beside myself with horror. Even as I blinked the next second and the vision faded, I kept screaming until my screams were met by my frightened parents. For 5 long minutes I tried to compose myself. Already sitting under the bright light, feeling the soothing stroking of my mother's hand and squeezing my father's hand with the other hand, I almost told them about what had happened. But their care and concern made me bite my tongue. Whatever it was, it haunted me, and I didn't want my parents to become vulnerable to it in the same way. After explaining that I had a nightmare and nodding in response to their soothing arguments, I once again remembered that face and trembled involuntarily. The picture burned so strongly into my memory that even when I closed my eyes and fell asleep again in my mother's arms, I could not drive away the vision of that terrible image. Saturday. Here, in fact, almost everything. The clock is 2 o'clock, 55 minutes past midnight. I have a little over 4 minutes left. I myself am frightened by that strange certainty that today everything will end, but I can no longer even think about what is happening. Something just cracked in the next room. Judging by the dark stripe at the bottom of the door to my room, It was the last light bulb that had exploded. With the departure of my parents on night duty, I turned on the light in the entire apartment. At midnight the lamp in the corridor went out. Now this. I just sit and write about it because I have no other choice. In the evening, I took off the only mirror in my room and put it in the closet. She drew the curtains, turned on the big light and the table lamp. An hour ago, the chandelier started flickering, then went out. Now the light of the table lamp begins to fluctuate. I am sure that in a minute it will also go out. I tightly locked the door to the room, but already I feel that it does not matter at all. It is here. 2 hours, 58 minutes. Sound approaching. Lord, I feel it standing behind me. I can't turn around. The lamp went out completely, leaving only a faint light from the monitor. 2 hours, 59 minutes. I cannot write. Now something will happen. I'm scared.